They called it a monster, a towering black stallion, so untamed that no rope could hold him. No rider dared even breathe near. At the county auction, people shrank back, whispering of shattered ribs, of men thrown like rag dolls, of close brushes with death. Everyone knew where this beast was headed, not to pasture, not to glory, but straight to the slaughterhouse. The gavel hovered, the crowd held its breath when a figure stepped forward. A war-worn veteran, pockets nearly empty, eyes carved with scars that time had refused to heal. He lifted his hand. One bid, one chance. The crowd scoffed, certain it was madness. Yet, in that silence, his voice rang steady, cutting through the murmur like steel. What followed was no fairy tale. It was blood, dust, and nights where patience broke like brittle glass. A battle fought not with whips, but with grit and silent endurance. Man against horse, will against fury. But here's where the story twisted. Out of that chaos rose not only a champion, but a legend too fierce to be forgotten. For when the stallion finally lowered his head, trembling and broken by no hand but his own choice, the veteran climbed onto his back. And just as the crowd thought redemption had bloomed, the beast erupted, charging into the open fairgrounds, scattering men like leaves, dragging the veteran into a storm of hooves and dust. Yet even then, as chaos thundered, the old soldier held fast. His voice, ragged but unyielding, cut through the madness. "Easy, boy. You're not a monster. Not anymore." In that instant, the stallion froze. The fairground stood breathless. And when the dust cleared, man and beast stood together scarred, defiant, unbroken. It was no gentle ending. It was raw, violent, and unforgettable. Proof that sometimes, redemption isn't won in peace, it's carved in the clash of fury and faith. That's the one that broke his owner's arm. I heard he killed a rider outright. Threw him, trampled him before anyone. He could pull him off. Should have been shot long ago. Only a bullet will stop him. People shook their heads, pulling their children back from the rails. Some spat into the dirt. A few laughed cruel and dismissive. Who in their right mind would buy that one man scoffed? You'd have to be insane. The laughter spread bitter mocking. The excitement of earlier sales curdled into disdain. Eyes slid away from the cage as though from a cursed thing, an animal already damned. On stage, the auctioneer tugged nervously at his collar. His practiced chant faltered. He banged his gavel for attention, voice raised too high to hide the strain. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a powerful stallion still in his prime. Large frame, tremendous potential for the right man." No hands rose. The auctioneer swallowed hard, his smile twitched. Surely someone wishes to test their luck. "The opening bid is the minimum. Barely more than a song will start me off." The only answer was the thunder of hooves against iron, the beast inside throwing himself again and again against the cage. The silence of the crowd grew thick, punctuated by nervous laughter, by the sound of shuffling feet as people moved away. In the third row, a man stood very still. Elias Carter looked out of place among the crowd of sharp-eyed buyers and proud ranchers. His coat was threadbare, his boots worn down at the heels. His face was lined, his frame leaned the bearing of a man who had seen too many battles and too little peace. The scar at his temple caught the light, faint but unmistakable. He was not a man who wasted words. While others averted their eyes, Elias did not. He looked straight into the stallion's wild gaze. What he saw was not only rage. Beneath, the fury burned something else, something he recognized from too many nights in the trenches, from the eyes of soldiers broken by loss. It was despair, cold, bottomless, and terrifying. The look of someone abandoned, left with nothing but anger to fill the void. Elias felt it strike deep, a mirror of something inside him. The auctioneer lifted his gavel one. "Last time," a voice flat with resignation. "No bids, then we'll all take him." The words cut through the murmurs like a blade. Heads snapped toward the speaker. For a moment there was stunned silence. Then the uproar began. "You've lost your damn mind," someone shouted. "That thing will kill you before the week's out. Let him one fool less in town." The auctioneer froze, blinking at Elias. "Sir, did you say I'll take him?" Elias repeated, his voice steady, deep as gravel. He stepped forward, pulling a worn wallet from his coat. His hands were rough, scarred, but steady. The crowd roared with disbelief, some laughing, some jeering outright. The handlers looked on wide-eyed, shaking their heads. Even the stallion stilled for an animal instant, snorting through flared nostrils, ears, flicking toward the voice that did not tremble. The auctioneer hesitated, then then slammed the gavel down with a sound like a gunshot. "Sold to the gentleman there." The declaration rang out, carrying both relief and disbelief. Dust hung in the air. Elias handed over, his bill's meager crumpled notes, the last of what he had. Elias Carter led the beast away from the fairgrounds with every eye still burning into his back. Some shook their heads, muttering curses under their breath. Others called after him with jeers, sharp as knives. "He won't last the night," one man shouted, spitting into the dust. "That monster will tear down whatever's left of his shack before the week's out," another added, drawing a round of cruel chuckles. Elias kept his silence, his boots pressed steady into the dirt, his worn hands gripping the thick lead, the rope that strained and jerked with violent force. The stallion inside the cage had been wild. Out in the open, he was worse. Titan's roar shook the air, his massive body surging against the rope hooves, striking sparks from the stones. Dust rose in choking clouds each time he reared, fighting every inch of restraint. The rope seared against Elias's palm, but he did not loosen his hold. His jaw was set, his eyes fixed forward, as unyielding as the iron that had once held the beast. Step by step, he pulled Titan away from the voices and into the long road home. The dirt path stretched like a red scar across the land, bordered by withered grass, burnt brown from summer heat. Grasshoppers scattered ahead of them, clicking through the brittle stalks. Titan fought the rope with every stride, jerking sideways toward gullies and thorn bush, dragging Elias dangerously, close to losing his footing. Twice he nearly stumbled into a ditch, saved only by a soldier's instinct, lowering his weight, driving his boots deep, centering his balance the way he once had under the recoil of heavy guns. Sweat poured down his temples, soaking his collar. His breath came harsh and ragged, but his voice remained level, low, steady as a drum beat. "Easy now, soldier," he murmured as if speaking to another man beside him. "The road is long, but we'll make it home." Each word was for Titan, but it carried another weight. To any watching eye, Elias was not only leading a horse, he was dragging behind him every ghost of his past. The comrades lost the promises, broken the war that refused to end. By the time the sun sank, the outline of his ranch rose against the horizon, or what was left of it. A sagging fence leaned at odd angles, broken in places where the wood had rotted through. The small house crouched low against the prairie, its paint stripped away boards, curling from years of neglect. The roof sagged with water stains and missing shingles. The chimney crumbled at the edges. The stable once built to shelter a dozen horses now stood choked with weeds. Hinges squealed like dying things as the wind rocked the gates. The place looked tired, abandoned, yet still standing stubborn in the face of time. Elias paused, watching Titan's reaction. The stallion tossed his head, lips curled, back in a snarl hoof, striking the dirt. His furious snorts seemed almost like disdain, as if the beast mocked the broken-down shelter offered to him. "This is what's left," Elias whispered. "Not much, but it's ours now." A shape moved near the gate. Sam Whitaker stepped into the fading light, his shoulders bent, but still broad beneath. A faded work shirt. His hands trembled faintly as they rested on the fence post. The tremor of age, but his eyes remained sharp, honed by decades of tending cattle and patching wounds. The lines in his face carried the memory of every beast he had tried to save, or failed to. When his gaze fell on Titan, his lips pressed into a hard line. He took 2 steps closer, then stopped as the stallion reared, screaming at the intrusion. The rope snapped taut, nearly wrenching from Elias's grip. Sam retreated, instinctively, boots scraping against gravel. "My God, Elias," he muttered, shaking his head. "Tell me you didn't buy that devil." "I did," Elias answered, simply. Sam's voice cracked with disbelief. "You've gone mad. That thing will kill you before it lets you lay a hand on it." Titan struck the earth dust exploding beneath his hooves. The sound rattled the boards of the fence. Sam flinched, jaw tight, his eyes never leaving the beast's thrashing form. The argument began before the dust had even settled. "I've seen mean horses," Sam said, his voice low but urgent. "I've patched up men, they've thrown and buried the ones they've killed. But this one is different. This isn't just rage. It hates us, Elias. It hates people. You can't fix hate." Elias pulled the rope tighter, drawing Titan closer, holding his ground against the beast's surging weight. His words came calm, slow, deliberate. "I've looked into eyes like these before, on battlefields, in men who came back from hell. Eyes filled with nothing but anger and pain. And I've seen some of them stand again. Not all, but some. This isn't the battlefield, Sam shot back. This is your wrench, your life. That monster won't bring you anything but a grave. Elias turned his face, the scars at his temple catching the dim light. Maybe, but if I leave him, he dies. And I know what it feels like, Sam, to be cast off, to be told you're nothing. I won't let him die the way I almost did. For a long moment, Sam only stared. Lips pressed, thin anger tangled with something else. Weariness, maybe even pity. At last, he exhaled heavily, shoulders slumping. He said no more. Darkness had fallen. Fully by the time Elias brought Titan to the stable, the place groaned under the weight of years, its boards warped and splitting, but it would hold for a night. He patched a corner of the fence, with an old beam just enough to form a pen. Titan fought the last steps, roaring his defiance, but Elias held steady, guiding him through the gate with patient force. Inside, the stallion circled furiously, snorting clouds of steam into the cool night. Elias sat down a battered pail of water and a bundle of dry hay in the corner. Then, exhausted, he slid down against a post, resting his back on the rough wood. His hands stung from rope burns, his arms trembled with fatigue. Yet, his eyes never left Titan. The stallion glared, pacing muscles rippling under the dim starlight. Elias breathed slowly, letting the silence stretch. "This is only the beginning," he whispered to himself. Morning came sharp and golden across the ragged hills, spilling through the gaps in the weathered fence. The light caught in the dust that hung above the corral, and there inside the pen, the black stallion stood with his head-high nostrils flaring. His eyes gleamed watchful and restless, a predator's gaze in the body of a horse. Now, in the first light of dawn, Titan still moved with the twitching tension of a soldier who knew the fight wasn't over. His coat glistened with sweat, every muscle coiled and quivering. Elias stepped out from the house carrying a battered pail of water in one hand and a bundle of dry hay tucked beneath his arm. His pace was unhurried, his face unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. The years had stripped him of illusions, and nothing in the beast's violence seemed to surprise him. He set the pail down, leaned the hay against the fence, and stood quietly as Titan him with open hostility. From the shade of the porch, Sam Whitaker watched with his arms folded, his weathered face pinched tight. His boots tapped against the step, betraying his unease. "This is madness," he muttered to no one in particular. Elias did not look back. He set the hay aside and moved toward the gate. His voice was low, carrying the steady cadence of command he had once used on frightened men in the dark hours before battle. "If you live locked up, you'll wither away," he said softly, almost conversational. "You want freedom? Let's see what you do with it." With a slow, deliberate motion, he lifted the wooden latch and shoved the heavy gate wide. The hinges shrieked in protest. Sam lurched forward, alarm bursting in his chest. "Elias, what the hell are you doing? That thing will tear you apart." The veteran only inclined his head, eyes locked on the beast. "If it does," he murmured, "then so be it." The explosion came the moment the way was clear. Titan surged forward like a storm, breaking loose iron hooves, pounding into the dry earth. He struck the feed trough, splintering it into jagged shards. Dust shot skyward, hanging thick around the corral. His bellow split the morning, a scream so raw that even Sam felt the hair rise on the back of his neck. The stallion reared four legs, clawing at the air, mane flaring like a black flame. His eyes burned red, rolling, white at the edges, promising nothing but destruction. "Get out of there!" Sam's voice cracked with panic. But Elias did not move. He stood in the open yard with his hands hanging loose at his sides. No rope, no whip, no weapon. Titan circled him like a predator, testing its prey breath, heaving in thick clouds, hooves tearing trenches into the dirt. Dust clung to Elias's coat, but he did not so much as flinch. The horse wheeled and turned, muscles rippling, drawing tighter with each pass. His rage was mad experience, palpable. The air itself charged with it. One strike, one lunge, and the man before him would be nothing but broken bones and blood. Yet Elias's boot stayed planted. His gaze never wavered. He took a single step forward. The stallion froze, mid-circle, ears twitching toward him. Elias filled the word. Silence with a voice that rolled like a drum beat, firm, calm, and utterly without fear. "Steady, soldier," he said, his tone cutting through the dust. "There's no enemy here." The words were not shouted, but carried the weight of command and the kind a frightened recruit obeys without thinking. For a heartbeat, Titan faltered, the power in his stride checked. His ears flicked forward, nostrils flaring. Then he struck the ground again, but the charge did not come. Elias did not yield an inch. His eyes burned with the same steel they once had in battle, when shells fell and men scattered and someone had to remain unshaken. In Titan's furious gaze, he did not see an animal, but a soldier gone mad with fear. And as he had once steadied men driven near to breaking, he spoke now to the beast. "No fight here," he murmured again. "Only ground beneath our feet. Only breath in our lungs. Stand down." The stallion snorted, tossing his head, torn between instinct and something he could not name. Dust coated his flanks, sweat gleamed down his ribs, and yet he lingered, hooves planted instead of charging. The circle slowed. Titan no longer spun in rage, but stood trembling breath, sawing in and out like a bellows. His head lowered fraction by fraction, ears twitching uncertainly. He pawed the dirt once, twice, then stopped. The distance between him and the man shrank, not with steps, but with a simple refusal to attack. Elias dipped his head, acknowledging small victory. His voice softened gentler now, less command and more reassurance. "See, nothing touches you here. No one lays a hand unless you allow it." From the porch, Sam let out a bitter laugh that held no humor. "You're dancing with death, Elias. One wrong move and it'll put you in the ground." But even Sam could not deny what his own eyes told him. Titan had not trampled the man. He had not bitten or struck or bolted. For the first time since anyone could remember, the beast had checked himself. The morning after their first confrontation, Elias decided there was no use letting the stallion rot behind the sagging walls of the corral. If a Titan was ever going to learn, he had to feel the open ground beneath his hooves, had to know that the world outside was not only cages and chains. Elias unlatched the gate and led him to the small training yard beside the ruined stable. The moment the rope tightened, Titan erupted. He yanked sideways with a violent twist of his massive neck, and Elias's boots skidded across the dust. Before he could brace, the full weight of the animal dragged him several yards, his palms screaming against the hemp rope. He stumbled, hit the ground hard, and felt the burn of gravel tearing skin from his hand. Blood welled instantly bright against the dust. Sam's voice rang out from across the fence. "I told you, Elias, you can't control that beast." Elias didn't answer. He wiped the blood on the leg of his worn trousers, spat into the dirt, and hauled himself upright. His chest rose with the effort, his back a-hotch from the sudden pull, but his grip on the rope did not falter. He held fast as Titan thundered and spun, waiting for the storm to break. "The price of trust," Elias muttered under. His breath was never meant to be cheap. The days that followed were a blur of dust and pain. Every attempt to lead Titan ended in violence. Elias was thrown and dragged, knocked flat. His ribs carried the dull ache of bruises that refused to heal. His shoulders screamed each night when he pulled off his shirt, the fabric stiff with dried blood. Once Titan slammed against the fence so hard that Elias was caught between splintered boards and the rope biting across his chest. He gasped, lungs seized the world, spinning with black edges. The stallion reared above him, hooves tearing at the sky before crashing down inches from his legs. Sam had come, running, his face pale. "You're lucky you're still breathing, for God's sake. Elias, let it go before it kills you. Sell it, shoot it, do anything but this." Elias leaned against the fence, wheezing sweat and blood streaking his face. And somehow, despite it all, he smiled. A thin, bitter smile, the kind that carried no humor at all. "Sam," he rasped, "you think I haven't been close to death before?" He pushed himself upright, gathering the rope again. "This isn't the first time I fought something bigger than me, and I'll be damned if I quit now." Sam cursed under his breath, helpless against the stubbornness he knew too well. Elias's mind was set to walk away. Now was to sign Titan's death warrant, and Elias refused. He would not fight the stallion with whips or shouts. He had seen where force led. He had seen men beaten into obedience, only to break, later brittle as glass. He had learned another way. So, Elias worked with Titan, as he once had, with raw recruits drilling through repetition and calm. Every movement became a lesson. If Titan pulled back, Elias stood still, refusing to be dragged into a contest of brute strength. If Titan lashed out, Elias stepped aside, held his ground, waited for the fury to run its course. And always he returned steady as a marker stone on a battlefield, never yielding, never striking. Slowly, through endless cycles of defiance and stillness, Titan began to recognize something alien in this man. The human did not flee, the human did not punish. The human endured. Elias muttered to himself, his voice low, so only he could hear. Strength is easy. Waiting takes courage. Day after day, the scene repeated. Titan's screams tore through the yard, his body coiling with rage, muscles rippling as he hurled himself against the rope. And day after day, Elias stood firm, sweat soaking his shirt, dust caking his skin, refusing to yield, until at last the stallion would stop sides heaving and stand still long enough to breathe. That was victory, even if it lasted no more than a minute. At night, Elias did not retreat to the house. Instead, he dragged out an old blanket and laid it by the stable wall close enough to hear the stallion's restless movements. Titan paced in the darkness, hooves clattering against wood breath, rasping like a saw through the quiet hours. Each time the beast whinnied in frustration or struck the boards with a thunderous kick, Elias stirred, speaking softly into the night. "I'm here, soldier. Easy now. Nothing will touch you tonight. Sleep if you can." The words drifted into the dark, not knowing whether Titan understood. But after several nights, something shifted. The screams grew less frequent. The furious stomping slowed. The stallion still prowled and snorted. But the violence in the sound was thinning, dulled by fatigue and the steady presence of the man outside his door. And Elias lay awake beneath the stars, hands folded behind his head, letting the cold seep into his bones. Every night was a test of endurance for both of them. One night, unable to sleep, Elias sat upright, resting his back against the warped timbers. He stared into the shadows, where Titan shifted the animal's dark form, barely visible. His voice came low, a whisper meant only for the two of them. "You're not alone, Titan. Not anymore." Memories surfaced unbidden, the trenches filled with mud and blood, the deafening barrage of artillery, the cries of men swallowed by darkness. He remembered the nights when he had crouched beneath torn canvas, praying the dawn would never come, because dawn meant more dying. He remembered the look in his brother's eyes when they returned. Home, empty of hope, unwanted by the world that had sent them away. "They looked at us," he said quietly, fingers tracing the rough scar on his shoulder, and saw nothing but broken things. They turned away from the wounds they couldn't see. He drew in a shaky breath, eyes fixed on Titan. "That's what they see in you too. Monster, rage, danger. But I know better. I've seen the soldier, under the ruin." Titan's ear flicked toward him, though the beast did not move closer. Elias's voice softened further. "They think you're nothing but fury. But I see the truth. I see a warrior abandoned." The stallion shifted, exhaling through flared nostrils, the sound almost like a sigh. Elias leaned his head back against the wood, closing his eyes. "Rest now, soldier. Tomorrow, we fight again." The dawn broke softer than the days before, spilling pale gold across the valley. The air held a gentler weight, not quite as tight with the tension of storms past. Elias Carter noticed it the moment he stepped outside. The ranch seemed to breathe differently. Even the battered fences leaning under years of neglect seemed less like prison bars and more like weary sentinels in the quiet light. Inside the corral, Titan stood still. His massive body glistened faintly with sweat, but there was no pounding of hooves, no violent crash against the wooden rails. He only blew sharp gusts of air through his nostrils, ears flicking back and forth as he studied the man approaching. Elias carried his usual pail of water, moving with the same unhurried rhythm as every morning. The weight of routine was deliberate. Animals like soldiers found their balance in repetition. But today, something shifted. Instead of rearing or slamming the fence, Titan simply tilted his great head, following Elias's progress with watchful eyes. The veteran paused, reading the stillness. His lips curved faintly beneath the shadow of his beard. "Good," he murmured. "That's it, soldier. Good." It was the first morning since he had brought the beast home that Titan's fury seemed tempered by curiosity. And for Elias, that was enough to mark it as a different day. He did not rush the moment. Instead of reaching out, Elias settled onto the low wooden stool he had dragged near the pen weeks earlier. It creaked beneath his weight, the sound almost fragile against the thick silence. He sat quietly, not staring, not demanding, just present. Time crawled. Titan snorted, stamped once, and then stood, glaring at the man who refused to move. Minutes passed long and taut, until the stallion's ears flicked forward. His forelegs shifted. Another step. Caution tightened every line of his body. His hooves sank into the dirt, as though each inch forward might be a trap. but still, he came. Elias stayed where he was, lowering his eyes briefly in a gesture of calm. When the distance closed enough, he lifted a single hand, rough and scarred, palm open at the level of Titan's head. He did not press forward. He waited. The stallion's breath rumbled like distant thunder. His ears twitched wildly, muscles rippling beneath the dark hide. For an instant, Elias thought the explosion would come, the violent rearing that had defined every encounter. Instead, Titan froze, nostrils flaring. Then, with a hesitation thick as stone, he leaned down. The soft velvet of his muzzle brushed against Elias's palm. Elias held still, hardly daring to breathe. His heart thudded like a drum against his ribs, but he did not close his fingers or press against the horse's face. He simply let the contact exist, fragile and fleeting. A grin flickered across his lips, weary, but real. That's it, I'm right here. For the first time since the auction, Titan allowed a human touch without violence. Elias did not push his luck. He withdrew his hand slowly and set the pail of water near the fence line within Titan's reach. He usually left it farther away, giving the stallion space to drink without the pressure of his presence. Not today. Today he stayed close, only a few feet from the bucket. Titan's ears pricked. Suspicious. His head swung between the man and the water. For long moments, he refused to move, staring with eyes dark and wary. Finally, instinct overcame. Mistrust. Titan lowered his head lips, breaking the surface with a loud slosh. He drank. In long, greedy pulls, the water flashing silver under the morning light. Elias stood quiet, hands at his sides, his voice nothing but a murmur. Good boy, that's it. You see, I'm not here to hurt you. The stallion's throat worked as he swallowed every gulp, a small surrender. For the veteran, it was more than drinking. It was proof that survival could happen in his company. Proof that even the simplest needs could be met without fear. Sam Whitaker wandered closer than usual that morning. The old vet had grown accustomed to watching from a distance, arms crossed, lips thin with skepticism. But the sight before him tugged his boots forward until he stood just beyond the corral. He froze there, staring at the impossible. The stallion, the same devil that had nearly broken Elias in half days earlier, was drinking quietly while the man stood beside him. And more shocking still, Titan had let Elias touch him. Sam's mouth opened, then shut again. Slowly, despite himself, a smile cracked across his lined face. Not wide, not triumphant, but real. Maybe you're not completely insane after all, he muttered. Elias turned slightly, eyes glinting with humor. Not insane, he said dryly. Just more patient than most. Sam shook his head, still stunned. The words had no bite this time. They felt like an admission. Elias led Titan beyond the Bizet ranch gates and down into the scrubland outside town. The dust clung to their boots and hooves like a red fog. The place he chose was an abandoned riding ground, long forgotten by the local ranchers. Its fences leaned like crooked ribs, the earth beneath scorched into clay, the color of rust. Once it had been a training arena. Now it was just a scar of trampled dirt and weeds. Elias thought it perfect. He tied a long lead to Titan's halter, giving the stallion the freedom of a wide circle. The rope was thick, the kind he might once have used to moor a gun carriage in the field. He wrapped it around his hands, planted his boots in the dust, and gave the order in a voice both sharp and calm. Move! Titan exploded, outward muscles rippling as he lunged against the rope. The line snapped taut, jerking Elias forward, nearly tearing the breath from his chest. The man bent his knees, shifted, his weight low, anchoring himself with the same skill that had once kept him upright when bombs tore through trenches. Titan dragged him a few steps before Elias dug in, refusing to let go. The stallion screamed, charging around in a wide arc, throwing clouds of dust high into the air. His eyes glowed red. His mane lashed like a whip. Sweat streamed down his neck. His nostrils flared as he thundered around and around, testing the limits of the rope. Elias did not shout or strike. His voice carried only command. Run. Run until you're done. 4 long minutes. The beast fought, circling with rage, hooves striking sparks from buried stones. Then, breath by breath, his speed began to fade. The heaving of his sides grew heavier. His head dipped lower when at last Elias lifted a hand and said simply, "Stop." Titan slowed, stamping in protest but halting. "Good," Elias said, "now with me." The ritual repeated itself day after day. Titan would rage, fight, tear, through the dust like a storm. Elias would hold the rope, dig in, endure. And little by little, the beast began to circle more willingly, the explosions shorter, the breath steadier. Trust was not won, but discipline was forged. Once Titan accepted the circle, Elias introduced the next test, the reins. He waited until the stallion's breath was steady, then drew the leather strap across his thick neck. The reaction was instant. Titan reared violently, his forelegs slashing the air, nearly jerking Elias off his feet. The rope burned across his palms, but he held fast, lowering his center of gravity. The stallion crashed down, shaking his head, teeth-bared eyes wild. "No one's forcing you," Elias said, firmly, sweat pouring down his face. "You just have to accept it." Titan bucked again, lunging sideways. Elias was dragged several feet before he braced himself, shoulders screaming with the strain. He did not pull back, did not fight the reins like shackles. He simply held the line until Titan stilled, trembling, glaring at the leather draped over him. They repeated it again and again. The reins would slide, Titan would panic, Elias would wait. Gradually, the stallion stopped seeing the strap as chains and began to see it as signal. His ears flicked at each tug, suspicion still in his gaze, but the wild fury no longer consumed him. It was a small step, but an important one. Elias knew it. One afternoon, just as Titan was settling into the rhythm of circling, the unexpected struck. A sharp crack echoed across the valley, a gunpowder test from a group of boys in town. The sound ripped through the air like cannon fire. Titan bolted, the rope tore from Elias's hands, ripping skin from his palms. He stumbled, hit the ground, hard, his knee grinding into the dust until skin split open. Titan dragged him several yards across the red clay, his weight pulling Elias like a rag doll. "Easy, easy, Elias," gasped, clawing for purchase. Finally, the stallion slowed, chest heaving of flanks, foaming with sweat. He came to a trembling halt, nostrils blowing clouds of dust. Elias lay in the dirt, bleeding, gasping for air. Then, impossibly, he laughed a hoarse, ragged sound. "Good," he croaked, pushing himself upright. "At least you didn't run. Forever." From a distance, a few townsfolk had gathered to watch. Some laughed openly, mocking the fool who thought he could tame the monster, but others exchanged quieter glances, uncertain. For the first time, their derision was mixed with something else, a spark of curiosity. The true turning point came with the saddle. Elias retrieved an old piece of leatherwork from his barn, a cracked, weathered saddle worn smooth by years of use. When Titan first saw it, his eyes went blood red with rage. He screamed, reared so high the fence rattled, then struck and down with enough force to smash the rails. Elias did not flinch. He placed the fat saddle on the ground in plain sight and sat beside it. "In war," he said quietly, forcing a man, "only breaks him. I'll wait." The first day, Titan would not come. Near, circling wide ears, pinned back every muscle ready to strike. Elias left the saddle where it was, walked away, and ended the session. The second day, he led Titan close and let him sniff the air, then pulled back, before the panic rose. "It's just leather, soldier," he murmured. The third day, Titan edged closer on his own. He lowered his head, snorting until his muzzle brushed against the saddle. Elias smiled faintly. "Good. It's nothing but gear, just part of the march." By the end of the week, the stallion allowed Elias to lift the saddle onto his back. The muscles beneath his coat rippled tense as steel, but he did not buck. Sweat poured down his flanks, his eyes rolled white, but the weight remained. "You see," Elias whispered, "this is only a burden if you fight it." The first attempt to ride ended in disaster. Elias placed his boot into the stirrup, gripping the pommel with both hands. With a grunt, he swung himself up onto Titan's back. The explosion was immediate. Titan roared and launched into the air, bucking with a violence that rattled Elias's teeth. The saddle heaved under him, and in an instant he was airborne, thrown hard onto the red clay. His chest hit first, knocking every breath from his lungs. He lay gasping, the sky spinning overhead. Sam came running, his face pale. "Elias, you'll be killed. Stop this madness before it's too late." Elias rolled onto his knees, coughing dust. His ribs screamed with pain. His arms shook, but his eyes held steady. He forced himself upright, brushed dirt from his clothes, and staggered toward Titan again. "I've fallen more times than I can count," he said hoarsely. "In war, in life, this won't be the last." He placed a hand against the stallion's neck. "Throw me as many times as you like. I'll always get back up." Titan snorted, stamping the ground. But he did not bolt. He only backed a few steps, eyes locked on the man who refused to stay down. The days that followed were filled with pain. Elias mounted tight and bucked. Elias fell again and again. His body blossomed with bruises. His arms bled from rope burns. His ribs HD with every breath. But every time, without fail, Elias rose. His voice never broke. His temper never flared. Again, he said, each time, steady as stone. We'll do it again. I'm not leaving you. Something in the repetition wore down the stallion's fury. Each time he hurled Elias to the dirt, he found the man climbing back. Each time he fought, the human's presence remained calm, unshaken, patient. Gradually, the bucking grew less wild. The stalls of rage shortened. Elias began to last longer on his back. One evening, as the sun sank and painted, the dust red as blood, Titan trotted in a circle with Elias, still seated firmly on his back. No bucking, no roar, just the sound of hooves beating rhythmically against the earth. Elias's hands trembled on the res, but his eyes shone with something close to triumph. Tears welled unbidden. His voice broke as he whispered into the stallion's ear. You see, soldier, we've begun at last. Weeks of dust and bruises had finally built into something that resembled progress. Those moments were enough to convince Elias it was time. He sat one evening at the old kitchen table with the entry form in front of him. The paper creased and yellowed around the edges. His pen scratched across the line. Name Elias Carter, Horse Titan, category basic, writing. When Sam Whitaker saw the slip tacked to the board by the corral, he nearly choked. You can't be serious, he barked. The county fair, that place will be packed to the rafters. They'll be waiting to laugh when you fail. Elias only tightened the saddle straps around Titan's massive chest. His hands were calm, his voice steady. If I keep him hidden here, if I never let him face the world, then all this work is nothing. We have to step into the ring sometime. Better it be now in a small fair than later when the stakes are higher. Sam cursed under his breath, shaking his head. They're not going to see a horse. They're going to see a monster. Elias patted Titan's neck, earning a suspicious snort from the stallion. Then we'll show them a monster that can be tamed. The fairground was alive with chaos and color when they arrived. Stalls lined the dirt lanes, the air thick with the smell of roasted corn, frying dough, and hay. Children ran laughing with sticky hands, ribbons streaming from their fingers. A fiddler played by the cider stand, his music swallowed by the roar of the crowd. At the far end stood the riding arena, a white fenced oval packed with spectators. Wooden stands groaned under the weight of townsfolk, eager for entertainment. Inside the warm-up pen, gleaming horses pranced coats brushed to mirror shine manes, braided hooves polished. Their riders sat tall and crisp as shirts and polished boots radiating confidence. Then Elias arrived with Titan. The great black stallion dwarfed every animal in the ring. His hide rippled with muscle, his man wild as fire, his eyes sharp with restless fury. A hush fell over the crowd before, erupting into murmurs. There it is, the beast, someone hissed, God above. He's actually bringing it here. That old fool's lost his mind. A ripple of laughter followed. Some children squealed and hid behind their mothers. As Titan screamed, pawing the ground so hard the dirt flew. It's in showers. The stallion's presence alone seemed to split the fair in half jeering, half watching in fearful fascination. Sam stood by the relays, pinched his hat clutched in both hands. He wanted to drag Elias back, but the look in his old friend's eyes told him it would be pointless. Elias Carter had made his choice. The taunts grew sharper as the pair neared the gate. Careful, old man shouted, a youth in bright riding gear. This isn't bullfighting. You're supposed to ride the horse, not die under it. The crowd chuckled. Crew, a farmer near the stands, muttered, Give it 5 minutes. That thing will tear the place apart. Titan struck the dirt with such force that one of the younger colts nearby shied, nearly throwing his rider. Children screamed, and their mothers pulled them back. Through it all, Elias's grip on the rings never faltered. He didn't respond to the jeers, didn't meet their eyes. His only focus was Titan. His hand moved gently along the res, his voice low and even. Steady, soldier. This isn't the fight you think it, Island. Sam swore softly. You'll kill yourself, Elias, he muttered. But his voice carried no conviction. Deep down, he knew Elias would not turn back now. When the announcer finally called Elias Carter and Titan, please, enter the ring, the crowd erupted with renewed murmurs. Some laughed outright, others leaned forward, eager for disaster. Elias placed a boot in the stirrup and swung himself into the saddle with deliberate calm. Titan shifted under him, tense as a bowering ears pricked back, eyes rolling white. Every muscle vibrated with the urge to bolt. The old soldier leaned low, close to the black man. His voice was almost a whisper. Breathe. Remember the dust field. Just you and me. Nothing else. The gate creaked open. Together, man and beast stepped into the sunlit arena. The silence was heavy, charged with expectation. Hundreds of eyes bore down on them, waiting for carnage. The course for basic riding was simple. Follow the white rail around the oval transition from walk to trot, from trot to canter, then back down again. No jumps, no obstacles, only control and composure. For every other rider that day, it was a casual exhibition. For Elias and Titan, it was war. The moment they crossed the line, Titan balked, jerking his head, hooves, striking the ground. The crowd gasped, half rising from their seats. Elias pressed down gently with his legs, keeping the reins firm but not harsh. Forward, he said calmly. One step at a time. Titan lurched forward steps, uneven sides shuddering. The jeers rose again, but Elias ignored them. His hand stroked the stallion's neck, his voice a steady drumbeat. That's it, easy now. They circled once at a walk. It was clumsy, strained, but the beast moved. At the signal for trot, Titan hesitated, ears flicking wildly. For a moment, Elias thought the explosion was coming, but he lowered himself into the saddle, his weight guiding his whisper sharp with certainty. With me. Titan surged forward. The crowd roared in alarm, but the horse kept to the circle hooves, pounding in rhythm tails, streaming like a black banner. Good boy, Elias breathed. That's it. Keep the line. When the time came to canter, Titan reared, then froze. Elias bent low, pressing his chest against the stallion's neck. I'm here. You're not alone. The beast inhaled a sound like thunder. Then he launched into the gate, powerful and swift yet controlled. They thundered around the ring dust, rising in great red plumes. Spectators who had come to laugh now leaned forward in stunned silence. The monster was not destroying the arena. He was conquering it. By the time Elias slowed Titan to a walk and guided him back to the line, the crowd had forgotten to breathe. The judge's voice cut through the hush. Entry complete. No placement. The technical flaws were too many uneven gate jerky transitions. Hesitation at every turn. By score, they had failed. But before the judge's words had even faded, applause broke out. It began as a smattering from the far stands, then spread like fire until the entire arena was on its feet. People whistled, clapped, shouted. Good job, old man, one voice cried. Ride him again, another added. Elias removed his hat and bowed his head slightly in acknowledgement. Titan, still trembling, stood proud. And beneath him, nostrils flaring, sweat steaming off his hide. Sam rubbed at his eyes, muttering, Damn fool actually did it. But there was pride beneath the gruff tone. A week later, as Elias worked in the corral, a letter arrived. The envelope bore the seal of the National Equestrian Association. Sam read it aloud, disbelief thick in his voice. Mr. Carter, your remarkable showing at the county fair has reached our attention. While your score did not place the courage and discipline demonstrated have created a sensation, we invite you and your horse Titan to compete in the qualifying round for the national championship. Sam lowered the page, staring at Elias, as if the words might vanish. They want you in the nationals. Are you out of your mind if you say yes? Elias stroked Titan's neck, smiling faintly at the beast, who still eyed him, with suspicion, but no longer hatred. We'll show them, he said simply. We'll show them Titan was never a monster. The afternoon was warm, and the kind of dusty heat that clung to the skin and made every sound carry farther across the valley. Elias stood by the trough, holding the rope slack, while Titan lowered his massive head to drink. The stallion's breaths came deep, his muscles still taut from the morning's exercise, but his demeanor was calmer than weeks before. Elias allowed himself the smallest flicker of pride. The sound of an engine broke the quiet. Tires crunched on gravel outside the ranch gate, followed by the groan of a handbrake. Elias turned frowning. A battered farm truck stood idling, paint chipped the engine, coughing. The door swung open and a figure stepped. Down, broad-shouldered, tall, the years etched into his face with the same severity as the scar running from temple to jaw. Victor Hayes. The name alone stirred memories in every stable within 50 meters. Hayes had once been the region's most ambitious horseman, running a breeding farm with dozens of animals. But Titan had ended that reign years earlier, a shattered arm, nerves twisted into permanent weakness. Victor still carried the crooked set of his right hand like a grudge. Now he stood at the gate, eyes narrowing at the black stallion, lapping water, his lip curled. "So it still lives," he said, voice rough with venom. Sam Whitaker appeared from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He froze when he saw the visitor. Victor Hayes, he muttered the years between them, doing nothing to soften the tension. Been a long time. Victor hardly acknowledged him. His gaze locked on Elias, burning with disbelief. "Carter, you're insane. That thing shouldn't exist." Hayes strode toward the fence, his boots striking hard against the ground. Titan lifted his head sharply, ears pinned back, a low rumble rising from his chest. His hooves stamped the earth, eyes flashing red, as if he recognized the enemy who had once tried to break him. Victor didn't retreat. His ruined hand flexed at his side, stiff but still trembling with remembered pain. "That horse broke my arm and nearly ended my life. And it will kill someone else if you let it. I'll buy it back from you twice what you paid, and I'll see it destroyed before it mims another soul." Elias's reply came like steel striking. "Flint. Titan isn't for slaughter. He'll prove you wrong." Victor barked a laugh full of contempt. "Prove me wrong. You think this beast can become a riding horse? You're a bigger fool than I thought. All it knows is destruction." Sam stepped forward quickly, trying to ease the air before blood was drawn. "Victor, you know Elias. Once he's made up his mind, no one changes it. You'll only wear yourself thin trying." Victor's eyes cut to him, then back to Elias, his jaw set like iron. "Then mark my words. That thing will kill you, Carter. And when it does, don't say I didn't warn you." He turned sharply, climbed back into his trucker, and drove off, leaving the engine smell of exhaust and bitterness hanging in the air. The silence that followed felt heavy, pressing down on the yard, like a storm. That night, Elias sat by the corral, the stars cold above the wooden post at his back. Titan stood within eyes, glinting faintly in the moonlight. The stallion's breath rose in quiet streams, no longer filled with the rage of earlier years, but something deeper. Wounded. Elias whispered into the darkness, his voice carrying only for the horse. "Maybe Hayes is right. Maybe all they'll ever see in you is ruin. Maybe you'll never be anything but a destroyer." Titan shifted, stamping once. "But I won't believe it," Elias continued. His hand touched the scar across his shoulder. "I know what it is to be thrown away, to be looked at and only seen for the damage. I won't let them do that to you. Not while I'm breathing." The stallion lowered his head slowly, exhaling through wide nostrils. The sound was heavy, almost like a sigh. Elias smiled faintly into the shadows. "Good, then we're agreed." Days later, a new visitor arrived, not in a rattling truck, but on horseback. A woman rode up the path, her posture tall and firm, her eyes sharp beneath the brim of her hat. She dismounted easily, her movements confident, revealing a lean figure hardened by years of work. "I'm Laura Jennings," she said, removing her gloves as she approached. "I hear you've got a giant in your corral. Wanted to see it with my own eyes." Elias raised a brow. He knew the name. Laura had built a reputation as one of the finest trainers in the region, her methods as tough as they were fair. She'd turned unremarkable colts into champions and temperamental mays into show horses. If she'd come, it meant she'd heard the whispers. He gestured toward the pen. Titan stood glaring at the newcomer, ears twitching, body tense. Laura studied the beast, her gaze unflinching. She didn't step back when Titan screamed and stamped, nor did she flinch at the sight of his massive frame. She only frowned, thoughtful. "It's not evil," she said finally. "He's not a demon. He's terrified, angry, but not beyond reach. His problem isn't strength, it's fear. It's rage without direction." Elias felt something stir in his chest at her words. "Then, you'll help me." Laura met his eyes. "If you're willing to listen, training a horse like this isn't about proving who's stronger, it's about proving you're worthy of his trust. I'll try, if you can keep your pride out of it." Elias smiled faintly. "Pride's long gone. All I want is a chance." The first session began with what Elias already knew, the circle. Laura stood beside him, arms folded, watching every movement. Titan roared at the rope, lunged, bucked, but Elias kept his stance, letting the stallion run. "You're pulling too tight," Laura called. "I'm out." Let him burn it out. He'll come back to you once the fire dies. Elias loosened his grip, giving the horse more slack. Titan surged forward, galloping in a wide arc, dust flying. For nearly 10 minutes, he stormed around, muscles rippling until his stride grew heavier, his breathing louder. Now, Laura instructed. Elias raised his hand, steadied his voice. Easy, soldier. Enough. Titan slowed, snorted, and stopped, his chest heaving. For once, he did not lunge at the fence or rear in fury. He simply stood staring at Elias, as if weighing him anew. Laura nodded, satisfied. See, he's learning you're not the enemy. Elias wiped sweat from his brow, relief flickering through his tired eyes. Titan tossed his head, but for the first time, he did not try to tear the rope away. The next day, Laura added obstacles. She dragged wooden poles across the dirt, raising them into a low crossbar. Let's see what he does with a jump, she said. Titan balked the moment he saw it. When Elias urged him forward, he veered violently, knocking the poles to the ground with a furious kick. Dust sprayed into the air as he wheeled, fighting the reins. Elias steadied him, voice calm. It's all right, soldier. We'll try again. They reset the poles. Again. Titan refused, shying to the side, crashing through the bar again. Elias held firm, guiding him back. His chest burned, his arms AHD, but he never raised his voice, never struck. Only the same words, steady as stone. Again. Try again. Hour after hour. Failure piled upon failure. But, with each attempt, Titan's fury burned shorter, his resistance slower, and at last, with the sun sliding low, the stallion gathered himself, lunged, and cleared the bar with a clumsy leap. Elias's heart surged. He patted the horse's neck, tears stinging his eyes. Good boy. That's it. That's the way. Laura grinned, genuine and warm. Told you. He's not just muscle. He wants to get it right if you're patient enough to let him. Elias leaned against Titan's sweat, damp flank, exhausted but smiling. Then we'll keep at it, one step at a time. The road ahead remained brutal, but for the first time, Elias felt they were not walking it alone. The day had been long filled with sweat, dust, and the rhythm of training. When Elias finally signaled the end, Titan stood leathered, but calmer, his flanks heaving the air around him, thick with a smell of horse and dust. Elias removed the bridle, letting the rope slack his hand, brushing the animal's damp neck. Laura leaned against the fence, her arms folded, studying the scene with the faintest glimmer of approval. Sam, as usual, hovered nearby, with a frown that rarely left his face. That was when the hum of an engine rolled down the road, not the rattling cough of a farm truck, but something smoother, more deliberate. Moments later, a sleek black car eased to a stop at the edge of the training ground. The contrast was stark. Its polished chrome gleamed against the battered boards of the old arena, an emblem of wealth in a place that had none. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Richard Langston. He was a tall man in an impeccably tailored gray suit, his tie knotted with precision shoes gleaming despite the dust beneath them. His movements carried the assurance of someone used to ownership to command. Even before the murmurs began, Elias knew who he was. That's Langston, someone whispered near the fence. A few curious towns. Folk had lingered after the training session, drawn by Titan's presence. The man who owns half the breeding farms in this state. Langston's eyes swept the arena sharp and appraising like a banker, counting notes. They fixed quickly on Titan, and for a moment admiration lit his features. But it was not the admiration of a horseman for a noble animal. It was the gleam of calculation of value assessed and weighed. He strode forward, extending a hand with a smile practiced in boardrooms. Mr. Carter, is it? I've heard a great deal about the giant you've got here. Elias accepted the handshake, with weary, calm, his other hand resting lightly on Titan's mane. The stallion's ears flicked back, sensing the change in energy. Langston wasted no time with pleasantries. His voice was smooth, his words measured like contracts laid out clause by clause. I'll be direct, he said. I want to buy this horse. $3 million, right here and now. The number hung in the air like thunder. Even Laura, who had kept her composure through Titan's worst storms, glanced at Elias in shock. Sam let out a sharp breath, muttering under his mustache, 3 million Lord above. Langston pressed on, his tone almost casual. With that money, you could rebuild this ranch from the ground up. No more broken fences, no more patched roofs. You'd live comfortably for the rest of your life. His eyes narrowed slightly, gauging the effect of his words. And not just that. I'd bring you into my stables as a trainer. With your reputation, an old soldier who tamed the beast, you'd be famous. Men would line up to shake your hand. You'd never want for anything again." The crowd that had gathered stirred with excitement. $3 million for a horse once written off as a killer. It sounded impossible, miraculous. Whispers ran like wildfire. $3 million for that brute. He'd be mad not to take it, sell it and retire. Any sane man would. Laura stayed silent, her expression unreadable. Sam's frown deepened his eyes, boring into Elias, silently pleading. All attention turned to the veteran, standing quietly with his hand on Titan's neck. Elias didn't answer. Immediately, he let the silence stretch his palm pressed against the coarse mane. Titan shifted under his touch, restless but waiting. At last, Elias spoke, his voice low. "Steady. Titan is not for sale." Langston blinked, then smiled as though humoring a child. "Mr. Carter, perhaps you didn't hear me. $3 million. That's more money than most men see in a lifetime." Elias's eyes, dark and unyielding, met his. "I heard you. But Titan is my partner, my comrade, not a commodity to be traded." The businessman's smile thinned. "You're letting sentiment blind you. This is an opportunity you'll never see again." Elias tightened his grip on the reins, his voice hardening like forged steel. "I lost brothers in war because others made choices for them. Choices about their worth, about their expendability. I won't repeat that mistake. This time I decide, and I decide he stays with me." The murmurs around the fence hushed into silence. The only sound was Titan's heavy breathing, the faint rattle of his bridle, and the dry rustle of wind across the red dirt. Langston broke the quiet with a short, humorless laugh. His eyes gleamed with mockery. "This world doesn't run on feelings, Mr. Carter," he said. "It runs on money. Money feeds you. Money keeps your fences upright, your lights on. You turn this down, and one day you'll wish you hadn't." Titan snorted violently, pawing the ground, as if rejecting the man's presence. Elias soothed him with a hand, but said nothing. Langston adjusted his tie, tugged his cufflinks into place, his confidence unshaken. "I'll be back when your pockets are empty and your stubbornness wears thin. Remember this day I offered you salvation." With that, he turned and walked back to his car, the polished metal gleaming harshly under the dying sun. The door shut with a heavy thud, and the car rolled away, leaving behind dust and a silence thick with judgment. The onlookers exchanged glances, some incredulous, some impressed, others shaking their heads. Sam was the first to speak once the dust settled. He marched up to Elias, his voice rough with frustration. "Are you out of your damn mind? $3 million, Elias? That's a fortune. You could have lived out your days in comfort. Instead, you're still here bleeding in the dirt for a horse that nearly killed half a corps. Dozen men." Elias turned slowly, his expression calm, resolute. "I'm not after comfort, Sam. I'm after trust." Sam stared at him dumbfounded, then spat into the dirt. "You'll break yourself chasing trust." Before the words could sour further, Laura stepped forward. Her gaze lingered on Titan, then on Elias, thoughtful and steady. "You know," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "I've watched men sell entire herds for less than half that sum. They tell themselves it's practical, they call it wise, but in the end, they're just afraid of giving more than money can buy. You're different, Elias, and that's why this horse follows you." Elias let out a breath, half a laugh, half a sigh. His hand stroked the great stallion's mane fingers, threading through the sweat-soaked strands. Titan leaned into the touch ears, flicking back toward the man's voice. Together, Elias murmured almost to himself, "We'll prove it. Value isn't always measured in coin. Sometimes it's measured in what refuses to be broken." The words hung in the warm air, stronger than any contract, heavier than any check could ever be. Around them, the last of the onlookers drifted away, still murmuring about the offer, still wondering at the man who had turned down riches for loyalty. But Elias knew the truth. He had already been rich, richer than any millionaire could imagine, because the bond he shared with Titan was worth more than all the money in Langston's world. A week had passed since the county fair. Yet, the memory of Titan's thunderous hooves still lingered in the town's whispers. Now, the true test awaited the national championship. It was no dusty fairground or makeshift arena. This was the grandest stage in the country, where reputations were made and dynasties born. The stadium loomed like a citadel as Elias and Titan arrived. Flags snapped in the breeze, banners of riding schools and famous stables draped across the walls. The air carried a nervous electricity, a hum of thousands of voices blending with the restless stamping of hooves. Grandstands were packed from end to end, every seat filled with spectators eager for spectacle. Judges sat stern and immovable at the long table near the ring, their jackets crisp, their pens poised. Inside the preparation ring, sleek horses gleamed like burnished bronze, their coats brushed to perfection, their tack polished until it shone. Riders in tailored uniforms sat tall, their boots gleaming, their expressions confident. Each horse looked like a portrait refined, symmetrical bred from lines of champions. And then came Titan. When the announcer's voice rang out, Elias, Carter, and Titan, a ripple of unease traveled the stands. Heads turned. Whispers rose sharp and incredulous. That's the beast from the auction, isn't it? They said it broke its old owner's arm. Why in God's name would they let that monster in here? The chatter swelled, mingled with laughter, disbelief, even fear. But when Titan stepped through the gate, silence cut across the noise like a blade. The stallion was enormous, his frame dwarfing the sleek competitors around him. His black coat glistened with raw strength, his brawny muscles rippling with every stride. His eyes burned, not wild with uncontrolled fury anymore, but alive, with power contained directed. The crowd leaned forward, uneasy, waiting to see if the beast would explode or astonish. Elias walked beside him, unhurried, his old boots dull beside polished leather, his weathered jacket out of place among the tailored uniforms. But his grip on the reins was steady, his face calm, and when he mounted, there was not a hint of fear in his eyes. The first round began with the basics, a series of straightforward jumps set not to terrify, but to test, control, and form. For the champions gathered there, it was a warm-up. For Titan, it was the moment. The world expected disaster. As the bell rang, Titan's ears flicked, nervously, muscles tensing beneath Elias. His head jerked toward the roar of the crowd, nostrils flaring. Elias leaned low, his hand brushing the black man. His voice was quiet, steady, as stone. Breathe like the red field. Remember, just you and me. The stallion snorted, shivered, then surged forward. The first rail rose. Before them, tight and stride, lengthened his hooves, pounding the earth. And then he lifted. A clean arc, effortless, despite his massive bulk. He cleared the obstacle without touching a bar. The stadium gasped for a second. Silence hung heavy. Then came a ripple of astonishment like thunder rolling through the stands. Again, Titan approached. Again, he flew, each leap stronger than the last. Dust swirled, rails fell behind him. Power thundered through his body, yet under Elias's hand. That power held shape, held purpose. A commentator's voice cracked with disbelief, booming through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching the impossible. This is the very horse once condemned as too dangerous to ride. By the end of the first course, the audience was on its feet. Titan had not only survived, he had excelled. The second round was another matter entirely. Here lay the gauntlet, the course that separated contenders from legends. Tight turns, deceptive spacing combinations that demanded precision and nerve. And at its heart, the dreaded double jump, the highest in the championship. A pair of rails so tall that even seasoned champions had faltered. Titan entered the ring sides, glistening eyes sharp but wary. The first obstacles fell behind them, but as they drew near the towering double, the stallion faltered. His stride shortened, his breath grew ragged, his great head tossing. The crowd sensed it instantly. "He won't do it," someone shouted. "Too much for that brute." Others laughed, nervously. Some simply watched, holding their breath. Elias leaned forward, his hand pressed, firm into Titan's man. His voice was low, urgent, caring only for the horse. "I'm here. We've come too far to stop. You don't face this alone. Not anymore." Titan's ears flicked back, catching the words. For a heartbeat, the stallion stood suspended between fear and faith. Then his chest rumbled a sound like thunder, and he launched forward. They soared over the first rail. Titan's body stretched his mane, whipped in the wind, and the crowd rose to its feet. The stallion landed heavy but sure hooves, cracking against the dirt with force that shook the earth. And then, without hesitation, he gathered himself again and flew. The second bar loomed higher, sharper, a wall meant to intimidate. But Titan rose above it, his massive form lifting into the air as though the laws of gravity had been bent to his will. His hooves tucked neatly his chest, clearing the top by inches. When he landed, dust erupted in a cloud. For one frozen instant, silence blanketed the arena. Then the crowd exploded. Cheers thundered. Hats flew into the air. The commentators shouted over one another, "He's done it! By God, the beast has done it!" The rest of the course passed in a blur of triumph. Titan, no longer hesitant, surged with confidence, taking each rail with precision, born not of breeding, but of sheer determination. When they crossed the final line, Elias raised his hand, not in victory, but in quiet acknowledgement of what had just been achieved. Scores were tallied. Numbers flashed across boards. At last, the announcement came: Elias Carter and Titan's silver medal. Gasps rose, then applause, but almost at once it became clear the medal meant little. The gold recipient was congratulated with polite applause, but the audience's hearts were elsewhere. Their cheers, their chants, their admiration poured toward Titan. The beast who had once been unwanted now stood as the day's true champion in the eyes of the people. The headlines, the next morning, told the story better than the medal count. The beast tamed from auction. Reject a national legend. Titan turns fear into faith. Elias Carter and the horse that shouldn't have been. After the ceremony, in the quiet of the stables, Sam found Elias leaning against Titan's stall. The old veterinarian's eyes were damp, though he tried to mask it with gruffness. "You didn't just save him," Sam said softly. "You saved yourself." Elias ran a calloused hand along Titan's neck, his voice rough but tender. "No, we saved each other." Titan blew a warm breath, lowering his set, great head until it nearly touched Elias's chest, as if sealing the words. Back at the ranch, the return was unlike anything Elias had ever known. No longer did the neighbors pass with mocking smirks or whispered warnings. Now they came in throngs, crowding the fences, eager for a glimpse of the legend. Children pressed close, laughing, pointing as Titan cantered freely across the paddock mane, flying like a banner of victory. "Is that really him?" a boy asked in awe. The horse nobody wanted. Elias stood by the gate, watching Titan's powerful stride, his own smile quiet but proud. "Yes," he said, "that's him, and he's proof that nothing is impossible." Sam stood beside him, nodding silently, his eyes shining with pride. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest edges. Seasons rolled across the Carter Ranch, like waves on a distant shore, springs of green grass and thaws in the neighboring pastures. Summers baked red and dry, autumns heavy with the scent of woodsome smoke, winters that wrapped the hills in silence. Through them all, Titan grew older, his once unyielding muscles loosened, his dark coat sprinkled with silver hairs. Yet, his eyes never lost their depth. Visitors still came. They drove dusty trucks or school buses parked along the weather-beaten fence and stepped out with anticipation bright in their faces. Some carried cameras, some carried notebooks, but most brought only their awe. They had heard the stories of the monster no one wanted, of the beast that broke bones, of the same horse who flew over the national championship's highest fences and landed not as a terror but as a hero. Elias, his back bent now, his beard whiter, would lean on the fence, post and greet them. His voice was slower, but his words steady. "There he is," he'd say, pointing to the stallion grazing under the oak tree. Titan, the horse they said couldn't be saved. Children pressed against the rails, reaching small hands toward the great black flank. Titan would lift his head ears, flicking forward and step closer. He no longer needed ropes or res. He came because he chose to. His muzzle lowered warm breath, brushing over eager fingers. Giggles rose as tiny palms stroked his coat. Was he really dangerous? One girl asked, her voice hushed, as if afraid the horse might overhear. Elias smiled, faintly, lines deepening around his eyes. He was frightened enough to fight the whole world. Sometimes that looks like danger. But fear isn't the end of a story. It's just the beginning if someone believes you can move past it. Sam Whitaker had long since passed, but his words lived on. So did Laura Jennings, who visited when she could, always smiling with quiet pride at the progress she had once helped shape. They too had become part of Titan's legend. The skeptics turned believers, the teachers who saw beyond rage to potential. As the years piled on high, Titan slowed. His gallop became a canter, then a walk, then long stretches of rest beneath the oak. He no longer leapt fences, but he didn't need to. His greatest leap had already been made, and it carried him not over wood and rail, but into the stories of people who needed hope. Elias spent more nights on the porch, Then in the saddle wrapped in a quilt, a notebook resting on his knees. By lamplight, he wrote, not with the urgency of a competitor, but with the patience of an old soldier who finally had peace. The words traced their way across the pages. They called him a beast. They called him a monster. They said he was not worth saving. But he was never those things. He was a warrior wounded and misunderstood. He was me and I was him. We fought side by side and we saved each other. Sometimes when his hand cramped, Elias would pause, look out across the field, and see Titan lifting his head toward the stars. In those moments, no words were needed. The day came, as all days do, when Titan did not rise. The morning sun stretched across the pasture, painting the world in gold, and the stallion lay beneath the oak, his great body, still his spirit, free. Elias sat beside him for hours, one hand resting against the silent flank. He did not weep, not loudly, not in front of the children who came with flowers, but his shoulders shook with afer, the quiet grief of losing a brother in arms. Later that week, they buried Titan on the hill overlooking the ranch. A simple stone marked the place carved with words Elias had written himself. Titan. The beast was tamed, but Titan carried far more than a rider. He carried a fire of hope that refused to die. Years passed like rivers carving stone. Elias Carter's ranch became more than land. It became a sanctuary, a place where horsemen and dreamers traveled from miles away. The same townsfolk who once mocked him now sent their children, pressing little hands against the fence, whispering, "That's where it happened." Schools studied his notebook, not for the techniques alone, but for the lesson carved in every page: resilience, faith, and second chances. In the twilight of his years, Elias sat on the porch, scars softened by time, eyes clouded but unbroken. He listened to the sound of children laughing by the fence line, their gasps of wonder carried in the wind. Closing his eyes, he heard more than voices. He heard hooves, steady, relentless. Titan's rhythm, pounding not just through memory, but through the marrow of every soul that dared to believe. Titan was gone, and yet he was everywhere, woven into every story told, every trembling hand that reached for the impossible. Elias breathed deep the cool night air and whispered, voice raw but proud, "We did it, soldier. They'll never forget you." And then suddenly, the ground trembled. A thunder of hooves rolled across the darkened fields. The children at the fence fell silent, eyes wide as a shadow emerged beneath the stars. A young black stallion, coat gleaming like midnight fire, reared high, his cry tearing through the night sky. The crowd gasped. Elias's hand shook, but his lips curved into a knowing smile. Titan's blood lived on, not just in memory, not only in legend, but in flesh, in spirit, in the unbroken line of wild hearts that refused to bow. The stars above burned steady, as if bearing witness. Titan had not ended. He had begun something greater. And so, the legend of Titan thundered on, not the monster of an auction yard, but a force that outlasted time itself. Proof that redemption, once found, can echo through generations.